Let's start with the entities that supposedly started this group millions of years ago, the Andromedans. Blue-skinned fifth-dimensional light beings. Their appearance is normally hard to comprehend. Many people have encountered these beings through deep spiritual meditation, normally too bright to fully see. They are positive beings, and I even heard a case recently where one of the Navy guys involved in filming that UFO off the coast of Florida was visited by one of these beings shortly after the filming occurred. So they're mainly nomads that live on world ships and possibly helped make our moon, which we'll get into a lot later. They were similar to us at one point, but they destroyed their world long ago and karmically look after us. Anyways, we see these blue extra-dimensional beings in ancient India as the blue-skinned gods who brought what we think of as very ancient forms of writing. And the Hindu belief. I think a lot of the Hindu belief system stems off of these beings and whatnot. So, another group we see in history are the Syrians from the Sirius star cluster. We see them in Egypt. Most symbolism dealing with these beings point to the Orion's belt. They're usually on a fifth dimension and are connected to the black triangular UFOs that you see in like southwestern America, like Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. There's been a lot of these sightings of these huge fucking black UFOs that are like triangular. A lot of times you can see through them. It seems like they have some kind of shield around them that makes them like transparent. But anyways, known for their height and extended skulls, I think Osiris was possibly one of these beings. Making his ascension story make a little bit more sense that maybe they had technology we don't understand, and that's how he came back to being resurrected. Also, a being known as Ptah, who is in ancient Egyptian mythology. He is Assyrian, and he messed with human DNA whilst he was in Egypt. So besides, the Anunnaki and the Pleiades being in our DNA, it's also possible that these Syrians played a part in a hominoid species that once lived on Earth. Because from South America to the Middle East, they found skeletons with naturally elongated skulls. And science hasn't been able to explain that quite yet. And I just found this out today. But there's certain places, I think it's Gothenburg or something like that in Norway, somewhere in Scandinavia, they're seeing ancient remains with elongated skulls. Some of them are, naturally, or not naturally, but made that way by, binding and stuff like that. But what were these Vikings trying to represent? Why is this head binding so popular in ancient cultures and stuff? And it seemed like it was a lot of shield maidens, a lot of women that were doing this interesting look. So anyways, I thought that was kind of cool. Again, elongated skull shit. You see it in Africa too. Parts of Asia. I think that's obviously where they get the elongated hats that you see in like Egypt, like on the Egyptian art and stuff. Like Osiris, he has a long ass skull and shit too. But anyways, so a lot of symbolism there with the Syrians. So from the Bible to modern day encounters, we see these higher dimensional beings that look Nordic in nature. Tall, almost white hair with very blue eyes. There's possibly two different humanoids that look this way that have visited our planet. This is where things get a little tricky to explain. There's one theory that these angelic-looking beings have been here for 3,000 years, originally from Alpha Centauri, and they're here living within the Andes Mountains where they're known as the Apuans. And I guess they've had contact with some of these higher vibrational humans. That's where I've heard some of these stories, is from some people that have actually had contact with these beings. It's very interesting. You can actually connect with some of these species out in our universe if you meditate or get your frequency just right or whatever. So they live there, but there's also stories of them in the Ozark Mountains and in the Rocky Mountains. Specifically in those two areas, I've heard of cases where blonde-haired women, middle age, maybe younger, have been impregnated by these Nordic beings and then eventually visited much later and been shown their child and stuff, and because usually the child's taken. So they're similar to the Greys where they're using our genetics, keep their population going. Other stories of seeing tall light beings similar to these Nordics occur near Mount Shasta, where they also seem to have almost like a third eye, like an organ in between their eyes on their forehead area. These people seem to be from the days of Lemuria and Atlantis. They had possible ties to Nordic-looking beings from the Pleiades from a planet called Aria. And besides these Aryans from Aria and the Pleiades, there were dark-skinned natives, Pacific Oceaner-looking humanoids that were from the planet Maya, also from the Pleiades constellation. They lived in Lemuria and Atlantis at the time. They came to Earth when the Pacific Ocean developed after our first moon crashed into Earth. And a fun fact about this area, or these Aryans from this Pleiades planet, they might have been the ones that the Galactic Federation sent here thousands and thousands of years ago to fight off these Dracos, or these reptilians that were kind of manipulating the financial and just governmental part of society in Atlantis and Lemuria. So these Nordics went to war with the Dracos, and supposedly that's how Lemuria sank, was because of this war. And then the reptilians went down into Antarctica and into India, where they live underground. So there's a story, though, that one of these Nordic beings crashed in the Black Forest in Germany. And Hitler and his squad in the 30s found this dude in this UFO. They interrogated him, and Hitler found some shit out. And I'm wondering if he thinks that, the Pleiadians, this Aryan from Aria, told him about, them coming to fight the reptilians who had control over the financial and governmental aspect of Atlantis. And maybe he took that, a little too far and stuff and assumed Jews maybe were these reptilians or some crazy, crazy theory. Don't take it seriously, but just a fun thing to spit out there that maybe World War II was started because he misconstrued some information that he got from a Aryan or a Nordic type being. So let's go back to the Pleiades star system, where besides the planet Era and Maya, where Scandinavian and Pacific and South American cultures get some of their very, very ancient ancestry from, there are also planets like Taygeta, where the Taygetans are from. Now, these beings look almost elfish in appearance. They're very pale skin, light brown hair, pointed ears, again like an elf, and live for hundreds of years. They're very similar to us in appearance, just like other beings from the Pleiades, very human-like, but just on a higher consciousness or a different dimension. So these Taygetans, they're protectors of Earth and their bloodline, which also lies in Scandinavians. And it makes me wonder, are these planets of the Pleiades the planets that they talk about in Nordic legends? Is that where they, get this concept and idea that, elves live on this planet and so lives on these planets and stuff? I think they're just referring to the Pleiades. So, some higher vibrational humans and psychics have had conversations with these beings telepathically, usually through the collective consciousness. They tap into it and are able to communicate. And they supposedly have ships nearby and are keeping an eye on us, mainly because of their, DNA ties to us. Karmically, they feel like they need to watch out for us. Out of many of the species out there, they're one of the ones that are most similar to us, not in just looks, but the fact that their oxygen and nitrogen levels are similar number-wise to us. Humans, we have a 78% nitrogen level and 20% oxygen level. Taygetans, though, they have exactly the opposite, 78% oxygen, 20% nitrogen. So, humans on a 3D, we have a denser gravity and atmosphere than others. Everything outside of Earth, space-wise, and most planets are on a fifth dimension. Earth, at least from our point of view, should be on a fifth dimension, but due to this moon matrix that we're stuck on, It keeps us on this physical primal level, and hopefully we can break out of that. Like I said, we'll talk about the moon matrix later. As our chromosome count moves up, though, so will our dimensional change. Our senses will also enhance, and our sexual organs will begin to not matter anymore. Once we work our way out of this primal state of being, physical sex won't matter anymore. One good example of beings that have lost their sense of self and sexual gratification are the Greys, who many people think are a singular species, but as we get into it, you'll see that there's also other species of Greys, tall Greys, small Greys. So we'll get into what they're called and stuff. Most people call these Greys, just in general, Zeta Reticulans, because that's their original planet that was destroyed. Besides our moon and certain underground bases on Earth, they have other colonies on this moon-like planet called Serpo, which is not in our system, but just an interesting detail. Like I said, they're trying to restart their civilization, but with lack of sexual organs, they've resorted to cloning themselves. One reason for them being common in abductions is the fact that they're using our genetic material in hopes to regain what we know as a soul. They want that feeling of empathy and emotion and stuff again. Those abductions were allowed by the government after Eisenhower in May of 1954 made a treaty with them that they could use us so long as we kept receiving technology. And for the most part, they have been nice about it. They're not mean, they're benevolent creatures for the most part. They're emotionless, so they seem like they're evil, but they don't seek to actually destroy us. The planet Serpo, though, that I mentioned, was a planet the Greys allowed 3 military astronauts to come stay with them to learn more about them. One of them died. One of the astronauts returned back to Earth, and another one stayed there to live out his days. So besides their help with technology, they also had a device known as the Yellow Book, which contained all the history of Earth up to about 430 million years ago. For some reason, most species in the Galactic Federation don't know what was up with Earth over 430 million years ago. This seems to be the time when the reptilians came into this universe. The fact that they're from another dimension around this time, Earth maybe could have came into this dimension or this universe the same time as the reptilians. Maybe it was even their planet. Maybe that's why we had dinosaurs and shit, 400 million years ago up to about 16 million years ago. So again, far out there theory, but there's some weird shit to it. Some of these abductions, though, just real quick, that the Greys were doing on humans stopped in the 90s. This is a crazy story. I learned it from Spirit Science, but basically this lady in Peru, she was telepathically communicated with by a extra-dimensional being that told her to go to Egypt, where she found basically the missing top part of the Great Pyramid, and when that was, discovered, it opened up this vault that showed her this huge, spaceship-looking thing. It's very, very ancient technology. And she got in this spaceship thing, then she went above Earth and then made this weird shield thing around Earth that made the Greys sick. And then once they got sick and stuff, they left Earth, so they really aren't around too much anymore. Supposedly, this is all a story I heard a long ass time ago on Spirit Science. Watch Spirit Science if you want to hear, the full version of it. But it's trippy stuff, man, And again, take it with a grain of salt, because I'm not saying that shit happened, but it's an interesting story, because abduction stories of Greys have kind of stopped around the late 90s, I would say. That shit kind of came to a halt. So there are the small Greys, known as Ebens, who crashed in 2 different areas in New Mexico in 1947, Corona and Roswell. Both these crashes were caused by the Hippoloids. I don't know if I ever say that right, but the Hippoloids are taller Greys that have a base within the mesa around Dulce, New Mexico, and they shot down these Ebens because of a beef between the two. Ebens are wanting to help humanity right off the bat, but the Hippoloids, who were here before the Ebens, were more resistant. Many know of the secret base in Dulce, where in the 80s there was a battle between Greys and Special Forces because the government or the Greys, one of the two, were taking advantage of this deal and starting to do more with genetic DNA than just, help their species. They were starting to create really fucked up shit in some crazy laboratory that's way, way, way beneath the Arcoleta Mesa in New Mexico. Dulce, New Mexico. But there's a lot of random stories too around Dulce, New Mexico of Greys, especially like slightly smaller Greys, trying to take people and stuff from their beds. And so yeah, look in the Dulce, New Mexico, man, there's a lot of weird shit going on there. We can see these Ebens as the dwarves that built Thor's futuristic weapons from Scandinavian myths. These Ebens also made contact with schoolchildren in Africa during the 90s. Reported and drawn by over 30 children the next day, these Ebens seem to communicate telepathically and have made contact with other children around the world, sometimes showing them images mentally, normally of like war and natural disasters, showing how humans will be their own destruction the same as they did to their planet. Ebens, along with other species, are worried about our atomic bombs and the impact it is having not just on our world, but theirs as well, physically and spiritually, or dimensionally. And if we kill ourselves, the blueprint of God, or God's ego death, dies with us. We've seen UFOs shut down atomic nuclear testing sites, and even shoot down missiles with weird, beam things. Though they can't fully intervene, they have to when they can to protect us. There's a fascinating story that Linda Moulton Howe, a journalist from Denver, tells where she was brought to a secret location where she's handed a file that says it's a summary of our information on UACs, unidentified aerial craft. It's titled to the president, but someone wanted her to see it, but not take notes. Apparently, it talked about these species being concerned about our atomic energy, giving us advanced technology, and having a part to creating us from evolving apes. The end of the file said humans destroyed everything, and now we rule chaotically over our Earth. And then it also said that we know how humans came about, like the answer of humanoids or hominids on this planet is now explained, and it just kind of ended there. So very ominous fucking shit if that's true. And I believe Linda Moulton Howe. I love her work. She's a great journalist. She first got into cow mutilations in the 90s, and man, she's up there, man. She's looked into some crazy shit, and she does some good detective work when it comes to figuring some of this shit out. So I believe her. Again, take it with a grain of salt, though, but I believe, the presidents, they do get this file that tells them all this shit. And I think JFK, that's maybe one of the reasons he got clipped, because he was about to tell the American people about all this shit, because he had just recently read the file. I think that's one reason, a younger, charismatic president isn't good, because they have personality still. They want to help the people. They have this hope left that older presidents and older government officials don't. It's fucked up, actually, that our government, we have paid government officials. Instead of back in the day, it was lawyers and shit. A lawyer would do his regular job, and then when it was time to congregate, I guess, and decide on some important shit governmental wise, they would go and do that. But in reality, they were lawyers and had other traits about them other than just being a politician. Paid politicians are the fucking worst, man. But anyways, that's not what this podcast is about at the moment. Let us continue. Similar to the Greys are insectoids. There are probably 3 or more different species that live on Earth or have been here. There are the mantis-looking aliens that are witness in UFO abduction cases, most likely been here since the beginning of humans and possibly Earth. There are ancient myths that speak of life being created by a flying mantis that laid the cosmic egg that Earth and life was born from. These mantis beings seem interested in our genetics or our soul as well. Maybe that's why in religion they always warn us that demons are coming after our soul. They really mean extra-dimensional beings trying to genetically harvest our soul. These mantis beings are brought up in Dogon and Mayan cultures. Oddly enough, these cultures also speak of star god beings from the Pleiades star system. Some say the mantis are actually from the planet the Dracos are from because they had similar DNA apparently and don't have any empathy. Besides that, I don't know much on the mantis, but it seems from whistleblowers there are indigenous insectoid species both on Mars and Earth. Known as the ant people to the Hopi natives, the ant people who live within caverns in inner Earth helped some of these Native Americans who were the ancestors of Lemurians and ancient bloodlines to these humanoids from the Pleiades. They helped them by bringing them into inner Earth during, the Flood and Ice Age era. They eventually surfaced in southwestern America. The Aztec and Incas, they actually have similar stories and myths where they also were taken into inner caverns until the surface was livable again. Special Forces Marines were sent out to basically gas out these insectoids that landed in the wood area. And it's actually near a place me and my wife stay sometimes called West Cliff. It's a teeny tiny little mountain town. And it's crazy. Supposedly, there's some credence to it because some of these Marines or these Special Force dudes got hurt from the gas. Like something happened, one of the gas things, like canisters, fucking misfired or something. And some of these Special Force guys got hurt, but there was no like evac, so they had to actually call in like actual hospital helicopters and stuff. And some of these dudes were taken to actual hospitals, so the public kind of saw what was going on in these really small towns, and they're like, "What the fuck?" But they said, it's just a training drill and stuff, and it could be, Fort Carson's nearby. But I heard this from a couple of whistleblowers on Gaia. They spoke about it like it was actual fact that this happened, where we've actually had to fight off insectoids recently in the Rocky Mountains. So, very interesting shit. And there was a few years ago these three fucking almost asteroid looking things coming down into Colorado. And, the government said it was B 2 bombers. But if you look at it or look at the video, man, it's weird. It's like these comets are falling down to Earth, these comets. And I don't know if that was the ships of these insectoids or what, but we never really found out more about it. We talked about it in one of our first podcast episodes because it was kind of big news in this part of Colorado, this UFO sighting or whatever the fuck it was. So, yeah, again, take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's a fascinating story, and I really think that could explain the sand dunes, because people cannot explain how the fuck the sand dunes came about in the area, but the way ants, burrow into the ground and leave all that sand basically behind these ant hills, it's possible, who knows? And by the time these beings from the Pleiades showed up to Earth, the Anunnaki were already here, so they used some of their DNA to make this new humanoid that eventually became us. This linked the Pleiades to us in a parental karmic manner. They felt like they needed to protect and look after us and keep tabs on us because some of their DNA is in us, some of that spark. So, and humans, I don't know if I've said this already, but humans have like a blueprint, a God blueprint. So God's ego death, when the universe killed itself and spread its energy through the universe, we hold some of that energy. And so we're very interesting to other species because they want that blueprint. They want to keep us around, especially for good karmic reasons. They want to look after us and make sure the universe, the energy within us, is safe. So, alright, but anyways, there's entities, the Octurans, and they're important for like our spiritual side, especially when it comes to like reincarnation of our souls. Like Heaven's Gate, they slightly determine our fate, mainly finding the right place for our incarnations through formulating progress on our soul. Most likely on a sixth dimension, they're slightly blue, they have small black eyes, they're similar head shape of a great alien. They're hard to comprehend, their height, they're more like light beings, very, high vibrational, very loving. They can replicate themselves through like a kangaroo-like pouch, apparently. Edgar Casey, who is like a mystic who's predicted a lot of interesting occult and esoteric things, like event-wise. He had supposedly communicated with these beings. They're protectors of this portal that transports our soul, human-like, but can't really materialize in our 3D world. So, and Edgar Casey, man, he's interesting. He's predicted, like, them finding the Bimini Bridge in between Florida and, Bimini Islands in 1960-some. He predicted the year and everything, but he has, like, past life memories from Atlantis and shit. And like I said, people seem to connect or speak to these beings when they're in meditation or just connected vibrationally to the collective consciousness. Oh, that was good timing on the meow, buddy. We're going to get into the feline subject, which I've avoided for some time because, I was at least a skeptic about there being cat-like people. But once you actually look into it, there is something to it, even if it's just a symbolism thing. There is something about cat people, or our ancient past, pre-flood civilization, having some kind of fascination with cat-like people. So, there might be something to it, but let's get into it. Standing at 8 foot tall, 650 pounds, we have the feline species from the Lyra constellation and the Sirius system. Humanoid in nature, and looking very cat or lion-like, they're known as the Irma, and they had a big part in humanity's past. There's a reason the cat is so very sacred in Egypt. Besides the simple depictions of cat-like people giving things like knowledge to people throughout pyramid art, we see the morals and aspects of these creatures placed in our society, like strength, power, royalty. Statues of cats in burials, due to wanting to connect with these creatures and qualities. We see that a lot in some of these tombs and stuff. Osiris's Book of the Dead depicts Ra as like a cat-like being stabbing a snake. And then Ra's daughter is depicted as a cat. Skemat is a humanoid Egyptian cat who is the wife of Ptah, who we talked about earlier. He was the Syrian that messed with our DNA. Some people call them the Peshat, which is a French word for cat, and they came to Egypt from Sirius as well, which would explain Ptah, how a Syrian would be with this cat-like being. Or maybe Ptah himself was a cat-like being just from the Sirius region. Maybe these Syrians we even talked about earlier, maybe they have some kind of connection to these cat-like people. Who knows? I think with the pyramids, though, and the natural energy from the time of Zep-Tepe, before the flood, to the time right before the Bible, maybe 10 to 12,000 years ago, maybe Egypt was a type of spaceport, and that's why we see all these different species. So, in the time of Zep-Tepe, we were aligned with Leo as well. We were at least in a feline-type period of time. The Sphinx itself was even most likely a cat's head before the Ice Age and flood. Humans changed it when, they came back to the surface or came about after the flood and Ice Age, and once humans, kind of had control of Earth, they fucking changed that shit. We still see the lion's head being a symbol in ancient structures and modern monarchy banners and flags. We see, the lion as the king of the wild. It's installed in us that these Irma of ancient times were powerful and king-like. The Essenes, or Essenes, I don't know how to call them, the Essenes, a tribe of mystic Jews who operated in Alexandria, Egypt. They built a duplicate Solomon's Temple in Leontopolis, which is known as City of the Lion, also in Egypt. And then introducing the lion of the tribe of Judah. These Jews respect the true history of the Irma in Egypt. It's interesting that the first, domestic cat also came from a mountain in Turkey after the flood about 10,000 years ago. It said Noah's Ark landed on a mountain in Turkey. So, it could be from the Ark, or these felines that Irma left us a gift in their image before they left. These Irma are nomads and live, in far reaches of the universe. They're very strong warriors and have fought off the Draco reptilians a few times. Reptilians fear these felines, even though the reptilians themselves destroyed the felines' original planet. And that's one reason a lot of these species don't have planets anymore, is because of the Dracos. Dracos we'll definitely get into more in our next Great Connection. That's kind of why we have this moon matrix on Earth, is to keep the reptilians trapped here on Earth. So it sucks for us because we got trapped along with these reptilians. But the Galactic Federation didn't know what to do. They had to contain them somehow before they continued the wreck solar systems and stuff. And also the fact that they might have a planet within our solar system, this planet X, or possibly even Nibiru that they see in, Anunnaki texts and stuff. They could be still in our solar system operating here and there. So, like I said, we'll get super into that, though, next time.